the golden rule is always to treat people the way you want to be treated. If organizations treat people the way they want to be treated, and consider, a part of that is considering them the way they show up, that we will be better as organizations if we do that.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast, where we explore the joy, the pain, the comedy, and human connections that make up the world of work culture. In this episode, our guest Shelly McAdoo explores the future of diversity in the workplace and underutilized metrics to consider. Our hosts, Chris, Michelle, Joe, and Julius, share their insights and experiences while offering practical advice on navigating workplace culture. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the fascinating world of workplace theater.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast. Here we are today again. How you guys doing?
I'm really good.
Doing great.
Good. We got a special guest today.
Special.
Shelly McAdoo.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for
So, yeah, absolutely. We're going to hop right into things. The way we usually start is off with like a headline, and Michelle kind of kicks us off. So, Michelle, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, I have a headline that sometimes we have it related to our topic. Sometimes it's just generally interesting. And I found something that I found interesting that was a study recently released by Oxford University about something that we all kind of sense, but they actually put like numbers behind it, how well-being at work is hugely advantageous to companies. It makes them more productive, even more financially successful. And that was sort of the extra secret sauce in this study that I thought was interesting. So it was kind of cool how they did it. And that was, the job search board Indeed. Mm-hmm. So as an HR person, I'm sure you know that one. They collected like millions of people's responses to some surveys they had on Indeed about that were really geared towards measuring well-being. Mm-hmm. So happiness, satisfaction, feeling purpose, the level of stress, and then analyzed all that and gave each company a well-being score. And then they took all the scores and they said, all right, what if we invested in the top 100 well-being scored places? What if we invested money in these companies? So from March 2021 or January 2021 to March 2023, they saw that those companies, not just in the moment, people were feeling good and these were successful companies, but over time, they were performing better than the S&P, than the NASDAQ by like 20 and 30%.
Wow.
So I just thought it was so interesting because a lot of times people think about when you discuss, our topic today, DEI, when we talk about the work that this company does, focusing on connection and increasing well-being in the workplace, people think it's like an altruistic thing or just trying to be a nice guy and whatever, but there's so much more to it. And I just love when you can take that gut feel, that knowledge, and put numbers behind it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's, spoken from a true spreadsheet lover.
I love spreadsheets.
Well, so what we're saying is investing in well-being makes sense, and not SENCE, CENTS.
Yes.
Right? It's actually, there's ROI behind it, and that's what we've been looking for. Like,
yeah.
I know because of my history that this stuff works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We've, in the past, we had stupid things that would happen. Like, people would get hurt, a lot of back injuries. Like, that's, worked for a big airline handler and in the cargo division, guys are throwing out their backs. Well, how about let's incorporate stretching? Let's pay for back braces, right? Instead of paying big time bucks for workers' comp and all this other stuff, like let's get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
And it made a big difference. It made it unbelievable to the bottom line, like to the tune of millions of dollars across the company.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you would think that something like that, as an HR person, maybe trying to advocate for changes with management, and getting pushback, maybe showing some of the monetary impact could help.
Actually, I'm not surprised. In the workplace, it's increasingly becoming more populated by millennials and Gen Zs. And if you do studies, or if you kind of look at kind of the culture as it relates to Gen Zs and millennials, they are driven by social responsibility. They're driven by wellness and organizations that lean into wellness and things that seem altruistic, but that are more about self-preservation and balance. And as we increasingly, as organizations start to become more centered around retention, not just gaining top talent, but retaining top talent, and we're starting to see more Gen Zs and millennials in the workplace, I'm not surprised that we're starting to see a little bit more weight and start seeing it, wellness not be this little soft, thing, and that metrics are starting to become inclusive of wellness. And you think about work-life balance, you think about remote, kind of as the remote workforce, becomes increasingly more popular, where there's blurred lines. There is something to be said for being able to prioritize wellness. And when companies do that and they lean into the things that are not just happening between 9 to 5, but what happens outside of those hours that affect how well you do what you do 9 to 5, when they start leaning into that, that's when people will start to say, you know what, I like this company. This company thinks about me. They think about what, how I'm feeling, about my experiences. And I think I'll stay here. So you get less turnover, which has a cost, because there is a turnover cost. So I think it's all connected. I'm not surprised by that at all.
Yeah, what you said, recruitment and retention were 2 of the 5 things or so that they mentioned in the study that was, really prominent in the well-being score. So those young workers that you're talking about, they want to go to a place, just like you said, it helps with recruiting people in. Even if the pay was lower, they were still seeing that attracted people to the company. And that retention and the turnover is so expensive.
It really is.
Just kind of tackling both of those.
I think of it as the spirit of the company, right? So I like this study because this basically takes that idea, the concept of what is your spirit, what's the spirit of the company, and it, puts numbers behind it.
Yeah.
Right? But I think, all too often what happens is that sounds altruistic, just like you said, but you're forced to be in a position to where you have to wait till something happens, right? And then you can't even become proactive about it. It's like the system is set up so that you can't become proactive because so many things are being, pulled your way, so you're more reactive about all these different things. So anytime that you would bring up, hey, well, what about our spirit of the company or improving work culture? It's like, oh yeah, that's great, but we have to deal with this, right?
Yeah,
so it's like, when will you learn?
Yes.
But this is something that you can now say, look, and I'm sure there's been studies, right? There's been studies about diversity, there's been all these different studies, but here is directly the spirit of the company matters.
Exactly. Yes. Millions of data points in this one, which I think is also unusual. And then having a way to actually measure well-being. So those are kind of the two kind of standout differences in this study versus others that they also cite. This isn't new, guys, but this is just an expanded way to really nail it. This is not controversial.
So, okay, so Shelly, how would you then you have a ton of experience, and we'll get your context and, your background in a second, but how would you believe that you could actually introduce something like this? Where it can be impactful, right?
Because we focus on wellness.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is, when how does corporate define wellness as well, right? Because there's, and I'm not even in corporate. This is so funny, you know what I'm saying? So I just know there's these tricks of the trade. Oh no, we believe in wellness, absolutely, right? And so maybe it's these, these items or aspects of wellness that we can push people into if X, Y, Z happens, right? And we're like, yeah, we totally believe in wellness, right? So knowing all that, what's going to be an impactful way, or to introduce something like this? I
will say metrics matter. Being able to correlate what is happening internally and what you're providing your employees to a dollar amount or the ability to retain to a percentage, a year over year, kind of percentages. Metrics matter, and being able to tie the metrics of the benefit of well-being to, what if we don't focus on this, what could be the fallout from that. So I think it's important to say that metrics matter. I also feel like most organizations are driven by being authentic, and they want to appear the way that they externally appear, or we're the kind of company that wants to be this, and we're this, and we have a focus on that. This is our core values, and they say it externally. I think that when companies really want to be true to their brand, they want to emulate who they are externally, internally. So the people that are their employees, so the people that work there, they want to, if you were to stop them on the street, they want for their employees to say that what that company is saying who they are externally, that's who they are internally too. So I think bringing it to that, to where it makes sense, business sense, and again, connecting it to, retaining, to recruiting, and things that help to move the needle for the organization helps. But I also feel like when you bring it back to just overall morale, when people have to spend more time during the day, especially when we were going into the office, it's a little different when, in the remote environment, but when people are going into the office and you're spending more time in this environment than you do with your own families, there are some people, and the leaders that are the most successful leaders understand that you want to make it as positive and as palatable and as sustainable as possible. And just connecting that to just keeping the right people for the right job. And if you give them what they need, then you'll keep them. I think that that's probably most important to me. The last thing that I'll say is just for just retention, for just employee experience, for employee engagements, there are 5 hallmarks. And the 5 hallmarks are to be valued, the person should feel valued, that they feel trusted, they feel like they can take risks without retribution, they feel like they have latitude to kind of incorporate or empower to make changes or to speak up for themselves, and that they can also be authentic. And if they have those 5 things and the organization can present those five things, then it's a benefit. And you start to see percentages increase in innovation. You start to see year over year where you have more retention than you do turnover. And it is by really leaning into some of that soft stuff, the stuff that we call total rewards. And it's not just, okay, you're going to get paid this, you're going to get this amount of PTO days, but you also have an organization that says we have flex time. If you have a doctor's appointment, whenever you get here, that's fine. That you have PTO days or allotment of hours that you can do with whatever you want to do with, so that your life can still be a part. You doesn't have to stop when you're here from 9 to 5. That we are cognizant that sometimes life doesn't just happen after business hours. I think that all of those things and making sure that people feel comfortable is the goal of successful organizations, and if it's not, those that don't do it should do it so that they can be more successful.
Okay, so you said that so eloquently. So what's the problem then?
Most organizations are not doing it.
Yes, that was actually one of the stats cited was that only 29% of companies actually have a strategy for this. They might have an intention. I don't think you're going to find a company that says, yeah, we don't really care, but there's nothing actually in place.
Yep.
Yep.
And there's the thing about it is that because it's been so, I say soft, there's soft skills. It's not something that is historically has not been, and I'm so excited to hear this article that has the metrics behind it now, but historically it's not been something that, how do you determine or measure someone's well-being if they're not coming in every day and they're saying, listen, man, I'm sick of this. If you're not,
right.
being that communicative, how do you determine that and how do you measure that? So without measurements, people don't have a sense of, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Is this going to be beneficial? Yeah. Is it beneficial if we do focus on it? And so I think that organizations, things that they can't measure and they can't see what the success marker is, and they can't see, I'm going to make, if we invest this amount, we are going to profit this. And if you don't have hard, lines and data to prove that, then I think most organizations shy away from it for things that they can measure. So I do know that, if we, increase our sales team, if we do this, then we're going to make this amount of money in sales. We do know that if we invest in XYZ, then we stand to gain this. So I think that they tend to focus on what is measurable, not because that they're apathetic, but because it's easier, and it's easier to do what they know than to kind of lean into stuff that's kind of still shaping and not necessarily clearly defined.
Yeah. I feel like that difference between the quantitative data and the qualitative data, right? So it's as I feel like we're kind of going through an evolution in the workplace post-pandemic where people are sort of saying, hey, I am a person and I'd like to be treated like a person. That shift is what the leaders of smart businesses are going to have to lean into, recognizing that qualitative data, like what was cited in this report, is data. It's data that you can do decision making on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the only problem that I have is I love the numbers and I completely get it, but it's just like, how do you make your people happy? Are people happy? Like, is your staff happy? Are they happy being there? I understand, you want the data behind it, but I don't think it's that difficult.
At what cost? So if your people are happy, are they saying, I want to work a flexi week. Like, I want 40 hours. If I decide that I just want to work 40 hours in 2 days, then I should be able to do it if I can get my job done. But that doesn't make sense for the rest of the business world. Like, you have, people in different countries or that you're communicating with. So it doesn't, you can't necessarily, if what makes, Joe happy does not make business sense for the organization.
Always makes business sense.
We have to find the happy medium.
Yes, but the question is, are you intentionally focused on making sure your workforce is happy? That's what I'm saying. Because, I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying, someone wants to, I only want to work 3 days to do. No. You're not going to remove the structure. They would never, ever do that. Right. But are you actually focused on making sure everyone is happy?
So
that's why I go back to the spirit.
How do you define that, though? What do you mean? Yeah.
Well, are people smiling when they come in?
Okay.
Right? Is there trust? Are they talking to each other? What are we doing? Do we have events that, where people are sharing and saying, what, I really love working for this company? I mean, I think there's many different things that you can look at, right?
Okay.
This is what I'm saying. We're talking about innovative products most of these companies have. This is something that's simple. This is something since we've been kids, be nice to your neighbor, but let's go play, right? I mean, these are not, this is not rocket science here, right? I just think that I believe that there's just not as much of a focus, and I think it's I want to say, and I'm being, pessimistic here. I think it's kind of a cop-out to say that, look, I want to see the numbers behind that. Well, what do you mean? Are they smiling or not?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about the essence and the attitude, right? So when I walk into wherever, what's the vibe I get, right? And you can have productivity and not necessarily have a happy vibe, right? There are other vibes, right? But it really depends on the people. So if you have somebody who loves challenges, right? They might not be happy in the moment of I'm figuring this thing out and I'm frustrated and whatever, but do they have satisfaction once they reach their goal?
Yeah.
Right? And so maybe another word is satisfaction, right? Are people satisfied with their work? Are they inspired by their work? There's a lot of
I like
happy is a great
inspired.
word.
I like inspired.
Yeah.
Right.
Happy is a great word.
Yeah.
There might be other words
Sure.
happiness is one of those emotions that kind of is fleeting. Right. But right?
Sadly, yes.
Yes, right?
I'm happy today because I have more money today than I did yesterday.
I love where you're going because so we can look at this too in another way, and that's looking at the things that dissatisfy people, make people unhappy, right? A lot of it's individualistic, right? Some people need that rigidity of this is my schedule. Tell me exactly what I need to do. Just lay it out for me and let me figure it out, right? Or lay it out for me and don't let me figure it out. Just lay it out for me and I'm going to go do my job. And other people are like, do that to me and I will quit tomorrow, right? So it's a very individualized kind of thing. And I think, getting on to the next question. I don't know if we want to move on yet, but it really makes a difference when you think about your culture and then how you hire people, right? Am I bringing in a superstar, right? There was this, I don't know if I saw it on LinkedIn or where I saw it, it was a few years ago, but somebody was talking about, I want to hire rock stars. And they're like, great. Rock stars get paid millions of dollars. They have all these requirements. They're divas. You pay for everything. They'll rock out for a show, but after 3 hours, they're done. Right? Do you want a rock star? And the person was like, no, I'm okay. Right? Like,
you need a mix. You need some rock stars and some roadies.
Right.
That's right.
So let's segue into this. Okay, so just because I didn't say this in the beginning, so today's topic is breaking through the status quo in hiring practice. So we've already kind of, we dove right in. We dove right in. We're into 12 feet deep, right? So let's get to the burning question.
Yes. And then maybe as you're answering, you could give us like a little bit of a mini bio.
Background. Yeah, for sure.
So our burning question today is, can we break through the status quo in hiring practices to build more diverse and innovative teams, or will traditional metrics continue to hold us back?
That is a burning question. So giving a little bit of my background, I have been a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader for 19 years. I am a practitioner, a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, certified from Cornell University, and I have had a passion for this forever and ever. Currently, in my role, I work for a pharmacy benefits management organization, and I lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion and people and culture efforts at the organization. And so this question is particularly interesting to me because our hiring practice it's kind of under me, particularly as it relates to diversity in our hiring practices. So to answer the question, can the metrics hold us back? Traditional metrics hold us back. I feel like it's a loaded question, because if I say yes, then there's a problem. If I say no, then there's a problem. However, I will say that I think that there, in general, if without enough intention, it will. Traditional metrics will hold us back. And by traditional metrics, I mean the traditional way by which we have, or organizations have historically recruited and tried to recruit for diverse talent. My organization is headquartered in, Wisconsin. And a lot of Wisconsin, it's a homogenized community. Mm-hmm. And when you think about, diversity, especially when we were going in the office, if you're looking to kind of diversify the swath of candidates that you have, you can only get the people that are within your community. Mm-hmm. And so if your community is largely homogenized, what do you do? I mean, and a lot of people are stumped by that. And I think that the reason why that is, and it's a double-edged sword. When you think of diversity, the first thing that most people think of is ethnic diversity. It's the first thing. And in a situation like our organization initially, when we were still going into the office and we were largely recruiting from Wisconsin, to try to combat the diversity and to try to incorporate some diversity, we had to first say, you have to understand that diversity is not just ethnic diversity. It's gender, it's disability, people with disabilities, it's veterans, it's, people who identify as LGBTQIA. There are different categories and different levels and different areas of diversity, right? So that was the first thing. To widen our definition of what diversity is first, I think is important for people to understand. But I do also think that it's understandable, and we have to incorporate the need to have diverse perspectives. If we just have just the men's perspective in the room, then you're only going to have a certain type of output. If you only have just black people that work at the company, then you're only going to have a certain output. Same for any other ethnic, group. So it's important for those who are in recruiting and you're looking for to create diverse teams to think about the different ways that you can incorporate diversity, ethnically and otherwise. Metrics, however, have become a barrier in diversity, but we are having to start to scale down what we actually consider diversity. And we're having to put kind of almost like barriers around what people do as it relates to recruiting from diverse communities. And you have to figure out a way, because of the metrics and because of the use of metrics, and if you go back to when, and organizations, my organization actually is a voluntary affirmative action organization, but you think about affirmative action and all of the metrics that were based, that affirmative action was based around. These are the exact things that if the ruling goes a certain way in the Supreme Court, that goes away. And so the metrics then become who can do the job. You can't look for someone for diverse perspectives. You can only send it to, you can't give, qualifying, detailed, I'd like to have someone that has this kind of experience. You can't put that in job descriptions now. So I do feel like metrics are becoming a barrier. I think initially it's important because it does help to shape. I really would like a men's perspective. I really would like a woman's perspective. I would like to have, at least some visibility for the experiences of people that have disabilities. So I want to make sure that we incorporate that in our organization. Without metrics to show that we have one person in my organization, we have one person that identifies as having a physical disability, we have a problem there. Without those metrics, you don't even take the time to even say, I want to have an equitable experience for people. Because if there's a person that shows that they have a physical disability that you can see, there's 5 or 6 others that have invisible disabilities that won't either apply or they don't feel comfortable staying because we don't prioritize hiring people like them. So I think that metrics are a double-edged, it's a benefit and it's a barrier. And to answer to your question, will it hold us back? Yes, if we're not intentional about how to maneuver around them.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
With all of that, okay.
All right, episode over. Just kidding.
It's like the gauntlet. So, wow. Yeah, it is a double-edged sword. I wonder, I guess the question is this: what's the fear in that, right? For instance, okay, you mentioned the Supreme Court. So is the fear that now organizations, since they don't have to, that it really just becomes like
well, it sounds like they won't be able to.
They will not be able to. So for example, if you are looking to, let's just say, if a company says, so next year we want to have more representation from women in our senior leadership in the C-suite. That's our goal. You can no longer have goals like that. That will become illegal. It will become a form of discrimination against men and any other, gender.
Wait, so you can no longer communicate that, or you can no longer think about, like, you can't...
No, you can't have, like, say, for instance, if you have a goal and you have defined goals, you've got your company objectives, every year you want to come up with, this is our goal. And you have your plan, and every department or team aligns to that particular goal. One of the overarching goals would be that we want to increase the, women in leadership in the C-suite. So then, of course, that means in your succession planning, and so all of those goals that kind of align up to that goal, you can't have that overarching goal anymore. If the Supreme Court ruling goes, against DEI programs, then you can no longer have those kinds of, strategies and objectives, written, implied, or otherwise. You can have, conversation and say, listen, Michelle, we're going to have to get more, we can have that and know that co-perception but we can't have it as a
Written.
as a written as an objective as an organization.
And I think that the key here is that the way that it works, the reason that you have organizational goals and objectives is because you're trying to corral a lot of different people who are working on it. So even if you have that sidebar conversation, that's probably not going to result in the change that would have normally been actually named.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it cascades, you then, so now that means that, you're looking to hire someone from your department, and so you're going to make sure that we've got 4 men that are applying for this role. Let me make sure that we have any gender, we de-identify any words that make it gender specific, so that we have more women that are applying for the role, so we can have 4 men that are applying and then 4 women that are applying as well. And then we're just going to make sure that we put in some people who are non-binary and throw in someone that maybe identifies as transgender. We want to make sure that we have enough diversity for the role, and you deliberately go to cast a wider net so that you get that kind of diversity. If you don't have that objective, then Joe doesn't know what I'm doing. We just had like kind of a, maybe you and I have had the conversation, Michelle and I have had the conversation, but he doesn't know it, and it doesn't get to where it cascades to every level so that every area can align to that goal.
Yeah, because if Joe has one role to fill, he wants the best darn person. I don't care if you're from an alien from another planet. If you're the best, I got one spot.
But the definition of best is, I think, what we're talking about.
That's the operative word.
That's again, and it's when HR can pull in, they can cast a wider net.
That's right.
Right, and you can find people. I'm holding back because I just want to. I got a lot to say on the subject about like how we look at people, right? Like we have gender, we have ethnicity, we have sexual orientation, right? And even inside of ethnicity, we have skin pigmentations and all this other stuff. The bottom line becomes: are you creating an environment where people feel welcomed?
Yep.
Do people walk in, feel welcome, no matter what they look like, no matter what their the boxes that they check? Do they feel welcome? If they don't feel welcomed, nothing matters. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah. So this is complicated. This is complicated because there's the perspective of on one side, like when you are looking to be a part of an organization, do you see someone who looks like you?
That's right.
There is, and I think probably a part of the, pushback of all of this in the beginning is, what happened. Diversity sounds amazing, right? But was there too much emphasis on like the specific diversity that you were now not picking the people, and so people started getting upset, and you started missing the whole point of like the benefit of having different. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is complicated.
I mean, it is, but you're exactly correct, because people that are to have a successful diversity program, you have to have a diversity program that doesn't create marginalized communities from currently communities that are not marginalized. So if you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and I say belonging, that includes every person, every experience, including, so right now, the biggest potential growing reverse minority are white men. And there is a fear that a lot of the programs and a lot of the organizations that are really leaning towards incorporating ethnic diversity, incorporating LGBTQIA diversity, incorporating the experiences and more diversity for women, particularly women in leadership. But then what does that mean for the white male that is not in leadership yet? Maybe he's an emerging leader. Maybe he's trying to learn, and he doesn't come with the power that is already assumed that the white male has. And he wants to grow too. What happens to him? Does he not have the opportunity?
It's like, sorry, bro.
Sorry, we have to hire, I mean, it's and so that's kind of the problem. And being a practitioner, of course, I am for total equity for everyone and to be concerned for the experiences for every person and every group. But being a Black woman, I also understand that it is not equitable already. So how do you not come across as overcompensating, but overcompensation is necessary?
Right, because it is the way that it is. None of this would be having happened this way if it wasn't
That's right.
the way it was. Right. So
How do we avoid some of the things that could have gone better from the past, right? So the big knock on affirmative action is people that were not qualified to get promoted got promoted because they checked a box. That was the knock on it. Now, the good side of affirmative action is there's a lot of people that got opportunities that were very qualified for the job that
Would not have otherwise
they would have
been
not have
considered.
otherwise been considered because we did have racist practices in this country. Like I
Still do.
Still do.
yeah, right. I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Right. Sensitive topic. How do we have a program that prioritizes like young Black women, right? It just, Shelly is yourself, right? What kind of program can we create to prioritize that not only are you in the conversation, but you're like overqualified, right? Like you're going to come in and knock it out.
I think that, the smart organizations were really trying to align their recruiting programs and their recruiting efforts to incorporate everyone and to have diverse partnerships with organizations, with HBCUs and with Thurgood Marshall, the UNCF, all these organizations and things like that to be able to attract top talent, but then also have partnerships with other organizations as well. ASE is another organization, which is the Hispanic Alliance for Career Engagement. And you have all of these diverse partnerships so that you can get, a good swath of candidates that all meet the bar, right? They meet the threshold. Like we want to make sure that they are above and beyond and they are extraordinary at what they do, but that we have a good mix of, of these people. So when you kind of make sure that you have the right mix and you have those diverse, recruiting nets cast, and you bring back enough diversity, that's the perfect, the best case scenario. The problem is that two things. Most people tend to hire who they are. Yes. And they hire, either I know for a fact that from, my alma mater that this person is, or I know that this person in my network, and so you tend to hire who you're like or who's your network. It is important for organizations to be a part of that and help, include them in the mix, but, choose the right person for the role. And I'm one that says if the right person for the role is not necessarily a Black woman, maybe it's an Asian man, that we have the opportunity to have a lot of great options. And I just think that the key is to make sure that we cast a wide enough net to be able to have enough variety in the options that we have. The problem with that is that we are not soon, if the Supreme Court ruling goes the way that it is, that potentially threatens the relationships of having partnerships with diverse recruiting partnerships with certain organizations.
Yeah.
So
it means that you can still have partnerships, but you can't define it as such.
That's
right.
correct.
And so it's going to boil down to, so one is going to be wordplay. So diversity is going to change to culture or experiences, whichever experiences and culture. Right?
She already figured it out.
Right, exactly. It's like experiences is like we want to have folks from all types of different experiences. So yeah, take that. But anyway,
mindsets, right? So one of the things I don't think we look at in diversity is mindsets, right? If you're looking to overcome something, right? Your company's going through a hard time and you want people that can overcome stuff, go find people from economic backgrounds that were poor and that went to college, that kind of did the work themselves, they're going to overcome. They're just going to overcome because they've already been doing that their whole life. It doesn't matter what skill set you need, like technical skills or anything like that. You hire enough of those kinds of people for that situation, they're going to overcome whatever because that's who they are, right? So I think that's one of the things that's really overlooked in hiring is what kind of personality do you need, right? And everything else included as well. But what I just...
so you had two things, right?
Yeah, but I forgot the other one.
I'm sorry.
I did. You know what? But it did remind me when you started to say that. So I'm curious, what do you believe the most underutilized metrics, since we were talking about metrics?
That's a great question. I think wellness is one. I do think that if you are in, a certain acumen or a certain industry or certain discipline, having people from that discipline. So for example, if you are, the chief of police and you're looking to recruit new officers, I think it would behoove, and this is a whole nother podcast, but I think it would behoove whoever is doing the hiring to go into the community that has had these experiences, that have had, these organic inputs. And, I think that that's important, to make sure that you think outside the box. I think is important, and the kind of metrics that come with that would be qualitative metrics, where you maybe ask questions that get to the crux of a person's personal experiences. So qualitative metrics, I think, are important. I also think that another metric that could be utilized or that could be used is also a qualitative metric, and it's for people to talk about, if you could do one thing, if you could change one thing. And Julius, I think you gave me that question. If you could change one thing right now and nothing, cost was not a factor, if you can ask some of those aspirational kind of questions and determine how the person answers the question as an indicator of, is this person pliable? Will this person be able to pivot well? Is this person going to be great at change management? Or are they going to be rigid? Is this person, does it seem like they're resilient? Are they innovative thinkers? Or do they express themselves well? Do they have great communication skills? So it's like little things like that. But I definitely feel like, and it would be really an assist to, yes, let's look at all of the, the data sets and the hard numbered data that we can get. But I think that it really helps when it comes to personality, organizational personality, when it comes to just the feeling and the morale of an organization. If you ask those qualitative questions and create metrics around those kinds of questions and those results, I think that can help immensely, because now you're getting to the heart of a person and not just the mind inside of an interview.
That sounds beautiful.
Is that why we've moved to these and I wish I could remember what the interview style is called, but where you start asking people like different questions, like what's your favorite color, and so you walk in an interview like,
you're like, wait, what?
Wait, hold on, I'm not.
I didn't prep for that one.
Yeah.
Blue,
and a lot of those questions are based on like predictive index, types of questions, or Herman brain dominance kinds of questions, and they are, kind of roundabout way of getting to, are you easily angered? Do you think well or operate well under pressure? Do you work better as an individual or better as a team? Do you plan, or how can you kind of pivot when something happens? There's a question that we ask as a part of our resilience assessment survey, and it's a business. I mean, it's within our business, and we'll ask the question, do you plan extemporaneously or spontaneously when you're on vacation? And people are like, look at exactly this face.
That's an oxymoron. You just said plan and spontaneous in the same sentence.
You can't do that. So But they ask the question, and most people have
I'm
the
a
same
smart aleck.
response. But the reason for that is so that they can see how flexible people can be. If you do plan spontaneously, or do you have to have this happens at 7 o'clock, and by 8 o'clock we're at the so-and-so, and if we miss that, then we have to make sure that, are you so just beholden to your organizational structure that if something happens and it blows everything up,
You can't adjust.
You're lost.
you can't adjust and
Yeah.
you're lost.
Yeah.
So, so they ask, and I have to look at that question again, because you really can't say plan and spontaneous.
It's really it's
They
tough,
call it.
right?
They
Yeah.
call it.
So, yeah, that I've reviewed a lot of these questions, and what annoys me about these questions is what annoys me about interviewing. Why can't we just have a conversation?
Yeah.
Why can't we just have a conversation and I can talk to you about your life? And I remember one of the first people I hired, he walked in the interview and he was so nervous. And luckily it was an internship. So we weren't paying him much. So he was getting hired anyway.
Little did he know.
Right. And so I'm looking at his resume and I see how nervous he is. And I just said, I'll spare his name. I said, you know what? Don't worry about this. Don't worry about any of the office stuff. We're just two people having a conversation. What do you want to drink? Let's go get something to drink. And as I walked up next to him, I said, and by the way, you got the job. You're here to interview me. You're here to interview me. I'm not here to interview you. You met all of our qualifications. That's why I'm even talking to you. And immediately he was no longer nervous.
Yep.
And diamond in the rough, top of his class, can't get a job though because he's so nervous in the interviews.
It is. When I was in high school and when I was in college, I was terrible at test taking. I could know the content, I could know the material, and when you get in the environment and you're there and faced with it, something just happens, and it could be anxiety, it could be nerves, but you're right, and I'm just like that. Where if I'm interviewing someone, I'll say this is just a conversation. I have to ask a couple of questions just for your experience, but we're just gonna have a conversation. And so to that, I think some of these kind of off the cuff kind of questions are kind of trying to help to break down those silos and break down the barriers of communication and make people feel more comfortable. For me, I think it's, some of the questions are kind of just outrageous. I remember I was a part of an interview, and we were interviewing a systems analyst, so it's a technical role. And I was a part of an interviewing panel, and the lady said, "Well, I've got a question. If you were a cereal, which cereal would you be?" And I was kind of like, what are we looking? What is the end result? Why are we asking this question? If he says grape nuts, what? If what does that mean?
Fruit Loops,
I don't know. What then? What then?
Yeah.
And so
Frosted
after the
Flakes.
interview, right? Exactly. So after the interview, when I asked her, I said, "So, what was the right answer to that?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know."
There was no right answer. I was just trying to get a flavor for who this person is, right? It's a great icebreaker question, though. If
Which
you were,
is what she said. And
Yeah.
so she said that it really, it kind of helps to it really wasn't going anywhere, and it
Yeah.
wasn't scientific. It really was just, and so maybe that says, hey, I like Fruit Loops too. And so we kind of have the, commonality in conversation. And so then I got it, and I just thought to myself, it probably wasn't the smartest question to ask.
well, but if the interviewee has no idea that it's just an icebreaker question,
Right.
You can't get this wrong. If they don't know that, they're gonna. Now I'm up in my head
Yep.
Oh,
If I say-
what's this role? So I need to be all right. So if they need me fun and bubbly,
Cornflakes.
Exactly.
Zero flavor. I'll pay attention to everything.
total, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So before we move on to the next section, what do you? We find this a lot, and I think that there's a huge opportunity. You get all this data. You have these interviews. You extract all this information with the people that you talk to or whatnot. What do you do with all of that after the person's been hired?
Once we do like all of the qualitative
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Like, yeah.
So for me, but I'm very intentional about it though. I make sure that it goes into their employee file. We have a system. And anyway, we have a system that we use.
You can look it up.
Generic system.
Generic
too.
system. But it has where you can put, kind of information from their, if they've gotten any accolades, if they've gotten any, information that you put into their one-on-ones, but then also information that you can bring in from their interviews. Stuff that, like, say, for instance, if they say, just in joking, I want to be the CEO. So what does that mean? So as you start to plan your development plans, the person's individual development plans, I know, Julius, when we had the interview, you said that you wanted to be the CEO. So let me tell you, this is kind of some of the steps. So for you to be able to do this, you have to go and that means that you have to have an actuary background. So you need to do this and blah, 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 blah. And by bringing some of those insights with their employee file, which now is all electronic for us, it does help when we are starting to map out their individual development plans. So I personally in HR am very intentional about what we do with that information. But then also conversely, if it's somebody that we did hire, but I do want to, make sure that we kind of keep an eye on, she did seem a little bit rigid about, or she did seem very concerned about, to where you can then look to avoid some of the potential pitfalls by having that information accessible. Most companies don't. Most people, once you kind of get through the interviewing phase, you may take a couple of notes and they may keep them or they may not. One of the best tools that I think people can use are personality kind of assessments to determine if the person's personality will align well or mesh well with the organizational personality. Those are very telling. And it's another tool where you can't get the answer wrong. It's kind of this or that. Are you more this or are you more that? And those types of assessments, I do feel like more organizations use. And I've actually seen some organizations, one of my previous organizations that I worked for, a person started in this space and they kept, going back to the assessment. And you know what, I think so-and-so would be better in this department or in this division. And then the person goes to this division and they thrive. Because of where they were hired doesn't necessarily mean that that's where they stay. And if you have an organization where you can go in different places and different, disciplines and stuff within the organization, that you can use those types of assessments. The more organizations do get that kind of information and do utilize it, the better the individual employee experience will be.
Yeah, Shelly, you mentioned at the top, I'm so glad that you brought that up about finding the right position for the right person. So is that kind of how you do that or how you approach that? Are there any other? Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll do, our organization, just by practice, we do personality assessments out the gate. I also, depending on the role, I'll try to look for think outside the box kind of questions or scenarios that you can create so that you can pay attention to the way that they answer, how they answer, and you can determine, what this person does have a really good, emotional intelligence, or this person seems, really analytical. I need that for data analytics, and you pay attention to those things. I also have been in the situation where I have interviewed for one role and the person has totally bombed that interview. Totally bombed that interview. But then they come across as, super warm or very smart in certain areas. And then you say to yourself, you know what, this person is really terrible at contract negotiations, but they would be great in employee relations. And I have, taken applicants and then said, hey, listen, Michelle, I had a great, person interview for this role. We're not going to hire her for this role, but I think she could definitely might want to consider her for this. That has helped a lot. We've actually hired a lot of people and kind of cross-referencing, skills in this set, but not so much here. Yeah. Checks all of these boxes, but we really need for them to have, this skill set.
Yeah.
Well,
more HR departments, if they did that and they
I was just going to say, that would be what you would expect HR to do. I don't know how common that is, but I just love hearing about your approach. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. There's so many companies that their chief complaint of the HR team is they don't have enough qualified candidates, right? And some of it is the data. Some of it's the way people apply. right? If you don't hit the keywords, if you don't know how to play the game, if you don't know how to play the game, you end up losing 9 times out of 99.99999, right? Like you win 1 out of 1,000,000 because you just got lucky. So there's already certain structures in place that can hurt people's opportunities. So I love what you're saying here about finding different roles for folks, because sometimes people want to just work for a certain company.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
Julius?
true.
We've talked about targeting certain companies, right? But sometimes it's not the right time or whatever. But when you're somebody looking for a job, and especially if you're at a point where you need a job, right? You may be unemployed or in a situation where you need to move on for whatever reason. There's a million of them. And there's a certain company that you love the culture, right? But they have a role, you're like, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. Well, you know what, that's the closest, so let me apply to that, right? And then if the metrics look at somebody and say, this is my favorite, when an HR person says they're overqualified.
Right.
I'm like, they apply for the job. They're not overqualified means like somebody told them to apply and they're going to walk into the interview and want to like bait and switch the interviewer, right? Like, that never works. But people try to do it all the time.
I could have your job.
Right,
Yeah.
right, I could qualify for it.
Yeah, I interviewed once for a job like that. The guy that was interviewing me, I'm like, oh, I could be doing your job. Oh, this is not a good, yeah, the recruiter did not nail this one. I need to not be here. But I think that's huge, that you find people that are talented. And I always feel like if your company is big enough, there's room for talented people.
Absolutely.
And it's never a loss. They're always going to provide more value than their paycheck, right? And so that's kind of what I want to see change and transform in the workplace is when we do find talented people, being able to find a home for them.
Yeah. And I think that most organizations will say that they're inundated with resumes and inundated with applications, and we're spread too thinly. And of course, the Great Resignation, and so now we're working in a deficit and trying to fill all of these positions. We have all of these open recs, and we just don't have the time to give it personalized, focus. Right? For me, if you have 10 interviews. If you have one person that's extraordinary out of 10, it doesn't hurt to help the experience of that one person. You're not going to have 10, unless you're like really amazing, you got a great swath of candidates, but you're not going to have 10 out of 10 people that are extraordinary that you just want to say, you know what, I think he was an amazing interview. Let me try to see what else do we have. He wasn't perfect for this role, but let me see what else we have. I also agree with you 100% that keywords kill us as an organization.
Yeah.
It kills any recruiting effort because anybody can go in LinkedIn and go on to Indeed or whatever and just Google what the quintessential duties are and just put those keywords into their resumes. And so now you've got this person on and they look good. Oh man, and they actually nail the interview, right? Because they know how to answer all the questions, right? So then they get into the job and it's like, well, what the
There were people that got jobs programming AI that, because nobody really knew what AI was, if you knew what the keywords were, you were getting employed by big companies. Now, they didn't last long, but they didn't need to because they were getting pilfered by the next big company.
Yep, because they're doing the keyword thing. That is the biggest trap. And now with this whole AI thing where, you can now go in and have, AI create your resume.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
All of that stuff. It's like, it's scary. As far as recruiting. So
ChatGPT still doesn't format.
That's what makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Making it personal.
Yeah. So I was asking about those, the underutilized metrics and some of that and what you do after, because I think that there's also an opportunity. What we like to do, working better together, what we like to do is look at some of those assessments and also roll those into curated experiences, right? Because sometimes you find like these different commonalities with people and it's when you're able to utilize some of that data in those types of experiences and people discover those things about those commonalities within themselves, it creates these unbreakable bonds.
Absolutely.
Which will also help with, trust and diversity, and it makes things so much easier. So that's something that
Relational equity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Definitely. So let's roll into this situation, which is exactly what we said, the situation. So Joe, go ahead and
Right.
let us know about
Great
the situation.
So imagine for a second.
nice.
You're hired as the DEI head in a U.S. tech company with a white CEO and a large percentage of leadership and employees who identify as Asian. Based on this, the company is meeting its racial diversity goals. However, you notice very few employees or leaders from racial groups traditionally marginalized in the U.S., Black and Hispanic, so you don't see those folks at the table. All right. Do you see this as a problem? If so, why? And how do you navigate this concern to leadership?
I do see it as a problem, and I see it as a problem because it limits the perspectives that you are able to incorporate in the organization. You are missing an entire group of experiences, entire groups of experiences. I can tell you it probably doesn't make a difference that the CEO is white, that the leadership, most of the leadership identify as Asian. In fact, I think that that's probably a plus because you already have some varying diversity there. The reason why I feel like it is a concern, again, is because you're kind of limiting your exposure. But here's the problem: racial diversity goals. As an organization now, especially, we are not going to be able to set racial diversity goals. So what that means to me then is you have got to create an organization where just having, like we talked about, the diverse swath of candidates and being intentional about having enough variety and enough diversity in your candidates, that's just intrinsic. As you are as an organization, it's just a part of who you are. Important is who you have in your recruiting space, who you have leading the DEI efforts, and that you have the relationship and the same vision, and they all are singing from the same songbook. So the CEO understands the benefit of having more diverse, relationships and why it's important to incorporate Black and Hispanic and LGBTQIA, and I would expand it even beyond these two identifiers. But to make sure that everyone, particularly the CEO, the DEI leader, probably the talent and acquisitions person that falls under that person, and I would even say senior leadership, and even if they are, identifying as Asian, they understand the importance of making sure that there is more diversity, including even more white people in leadership, like just more variety and diversity. I think the fact that there is, diversity is a plus, that there is only a couple of categories of diversity is a problem. As a leader, I would look to align our goals to be more just intrinsically interested in creating just cultural experiences and incorporating the cultural experiences across the board. And that's probably, as a DEI leader, I would look to align with the CEO and with the rest of our leadership team to try to incorporate that and have it cascade to every level of the organization.
I hadn't really thought as much about, I think that's super smart, who's leading the effort. If there's diversity within who's leading their effort, then it's going to be a diverse,
Yep.
It's way more likely to be diverse. I didn't think about that before. So that's smart. Michelle, so you have a background in pharmaceutical. So how was, which I don't know why I said that, but that's just the fact. But I'm like,
Just in case somebody's tuning in for the first time.
Just in case, yeah. What was it like? Did you feel like, from a diversity standpoint, like what was it in your makeup? What was that like?
Well, I had a pretty diverse team. In my team, it was very female dominated. So I was kind of proud to have, men on my team as well. It was a little bit rare for my group. And, had racial diversity as well as neurodivergent diversity. So I think that our team worked extremely well together. But what I also want to mention was, we had some diversity goals as well, but it was really clear with our HR team and our recruiting partners that top talent always wins. And I think there's this assumption that if you have to have a diverse slate to consider, that if you're making a diverse hire, quote unquote, that's not the best hire. And it was just, that really irked me. So I loved that phrase, top talent always wins, because it's also sort of an element of white privilege to get a job and never be questioned, did you have the best talent? And if you're a person of color who, just because that's very easy to see, right? If you're a person of color who's hired for a job, people might think, is this an affirmative action hire? Is this something that was like, I had to, yeah, exactly. So anyhow, I think that if you're going to have, which it sounds like we're not going to be able to anymore, coupling it with that assumption, it doesn't have to be either or, nor should it be. No one wants it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will say that even if, I have to qualify this, even if the Supreme Court rules against DEI programs, we can still, the
state by state, right?
It is state by state, and organizations can choose to accept it or not. There are nuances that you can kind of work around.
So
you can always do better than the law, but you have to make sure you're in the spirit of the law when you're doing better. This would be great to have Scott on. Mm-hmm. Just like.
So I think that without structure, though, if the law is gone, it's sort of like, when the voting rights law was rolled back, because we've solved that problem. And now you see people like our programming as a society comes out when the structural scaffolding goes away. So if you're just relying on, it goes back to kind of what we were saying before, if you're just relying on the good intentions of people to be altruistic, that's not sustainable. It's not going to move forward, and you're going to trickle by trickle have, just like what you were saying, Julius, we won't have the diversity in the top tier, so all the hiring is going to kind of look like those folks. So that structural scaffolding is super, super important. And, even if there's ways to get around it, that requires so much intentionality to do that I just don't see it happening.
Unless we know that numbers rule the world, right? So if you are a prominent company and you are trying to be the best, whichever company is, and you're showing that, diversity or whichever way you want to culturally, we're killing it, right? It's because of our culture, right? And our culture is made up of this. Then you can follow leader, and companies will follow if you're successful. I believe that. I really do believe that, especially this day and age, because the one thing about such a push for diversity is it's on everyone's minds, right? And there's been enough data to say, like, okay, it makes sense, right? We may be able to, the laws may change, but you're not going to be able to take what has been established out of people's minds, right? You may get pushback from, folks, but that pushback was already there, right? I think people are still going to put I think that, especially you got, Gen Zers or, millennials that are coming out they're going to be like, I don't want to work here. Right, because they don't have those same experiences as folks who may have had that mindset that was cemented in them. That like, do we really need diversity and so and so? They're like, they live in diverse. They are diverse, right? In fact, they're like, what is the problem, right? So, and their thought process in why they're joining organizations that's already ingrained in them. They may need, even if they don't even articulate it, they're gonna be like, I don't want to work here. There's nobody here that's right.
I think I think that's the reputation for Gen Z, but I've got some Gen Z kids. I get that, and I see it.
You're
but
like,
I am
trust
also.
me, there are others.
We're living in Illinois, and the education system throughout the country is not equitable. I don't think Gen Z just means progressive. I think Gen Z and like open-minded about all the diversity that we're talking about here. There's an entire generation of kids who are of that age who have completely opposite mindset. So I still contend that there needs to be the structure there. And I don't think we can, even though numbers do rule, especially in business, we also have to recognize that emotions really, really rule. Yep. No matter what the numbers say, your emotions are going to dictate how you interpret those numbers.
Yep, I will go with you on that. I think without structure, we are going to revert back to our lesser selves, lesser evolved, because the natural default, not just as, and not as individuals, but the natural default as a society.
That's right.
To revert back to what worked or what we thought worked or
Right.
what was habit.
What was familiar.
What was familiar.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Yes, it makes sense, right? But the challenger in me says that as much of that will happen, like from a legal, I think that there's going to be this emergence of innovation. The opposite, right? It's kind of like when you make a law and you just think like, oh, okay, only drinking or only whatever from this period. Like, oh, all of a sudden because you have this law, then
You
people
have
go
to have
underground.
both.
Then
You can't have one or just the other.
People go underground.
So here's what you're saying is that we're going to have more innovation because the law won't be there, and people will kind of need to emerge.
I'm saying whether we like it or not, I think that if law goes one way, then you're going to have all types of different innovative ways as to why you're going to still get the same thing. Because I think on a whole, more people believe in diversity than not. I really do believe that. Now, politically, how it's portrayed, I think, because you're black, white, or whatever you want to say, but I think there's so much diversity that's out there, and I really believe it. I do.
I'm going to say something really controversial here. I think the problem that we really need to focus on is the continued marginalization of people. And it's in certain groups is more than others, right? And the Hispanic community and Black community here around Chicagoland, right? But when we are operating in a world where for me to win, you have to lose, that's a bad world to live in.
It's the national narrative.
That is the national narrative.
And a lot of it can be a false narrative, but if we hold it dear to our heart that it's the truth, we're not going to make the kind of change that we want to see. And that's
such a bigger issue. I feel like the power structures that are in place will not allow for too much disruption or too much fairness so that we all can win. I just don't.
Well, now we're getting to real.
Yeah, that's why I said
completely different podcast.
The next podcast. We got like 3 minutes.
Here's the traditionally conservative person on the panel throwing the bomb out.
This does not sound controversial to me at all.
All right, so we're gonna bounce to the. This is like part 2 coming up. We're gonna have to continue this. My goodness, right? So the last part is workplace stories, right? And so today we're going to do something a little bit different than we've done, which is sometimes we read stories, but you have a story to share. Sometimes it's directly correlated to what we're talking about, and sometimes it's just interesting.
I will say this story will bring some levity.
That's what we need. Yes.
I was working at an organization and was new in my role and kind of new to leadership, and was invited to the retirement party of another young lady that was, she was in a similar role and she was retiring. And so she invited me to her retirement party, and it had the president and CEO and, a lot of other, senior leadership that was it was a luncheon. And so I got the invitation, and I told my boss, we're still very close today, and I said, "You're not going to believe it. I got invited. I'm going to Beverly's retirement party. And he was like, what? Are you serious? Oh, that's awesome. And make sure that that you dress the part, and, this. And he's giving me all of these pointers. And he said, you are super smart, so let them know how smart you are. And I was like, okay. He's like, really lean in. Scott was the CEO at the time, and so Scott, talk to Scott and really, create some organic opportunities for you to get to know Scott and him to get to know you. I said, okay, I got this. And so I wore my suit, went to the luncheon, and, they're having all of these really highbrowed, above my head kind of conversations in some instances, and I can't figure out a way. And you could tell that everybody that was a part of the luncheon are looking for their opportunity. I got this. And so the CEO's wife was there, and she started to talk about how since she's retired that she's really gotten into reality television. And how she likes it. She said, I don't like the kind of with the wives of this and wives of that. She was like, I kind of like storage wars and things like that. And so she's like, all of the little shows about novelties and antiques and stuff. And I said, oh, okay. And because I watch HGTV, all kinds of,
yes,
do it
love
yourself.
Those. Makeovers.
Antique Roadshow. I watch all of that. And so I was like, okay, this is it. I got this. So one of the shows that I was watching was called Hardcore Pawn. That was the name of the show.
I think I see where this is going.
Pawn. And the president and his wife are sitting across from me at the table, and I was like, this is it. I got it. I'm going to, because I know she watches it. It's a great show. So I said, so, Mary, do you guys watch hardcore porn? and I said, I'm in hardcore porn. And she stopped, and she kind of was like, before I said, I'm in hardcore porn, because I didn't notice I had said it wrong. And so she looked at me like, wait. And I said, and so the president was sitting across from me. He just spit his water out, just like cracking up laughing, and he just could not get the enough of it. And so he leaves. He says, I got to get back to the office. They had a leadership meeting that day. He said, I got to get back to the office. You guys go ahead and keep having lunch. I said, Scott, please do not say anything. Please do not say anything. Because he had a meeting with my boss. I said, please don't tell him what I did. And he said, oh, no. Not a problem. It's good. This stays here. Not a problem.
Sure it does.
So I get back. And so, this is after the lunch, and maybe it's about 4 o'clock that I finally get back to the office. And so I'm going to, kind of catch up on work, and I go into my office, which is right next to my boss's office. And as soon as he hears me come back, he comes in and he says, what did you do? What did you do? And I was like, I'm so sorry. I tried to say it. And I said, I meant hardcore porn. I corrected it. I said, and so from there going on, that president and CEO retired just before I even left the organization. And ever since then, and this was like, I was there for 16 years. This is like year 3 or so that I was into the organization. So for the rest of that time, my tenure there before he retired, it was always, he would see me in the elevator. He was like, hey, Shell, you still watching those shows? And so it helped for him to know who I was. We had 1,500 employees, and for him to be able to know my name and speak to me in the elevator. And at that point, after a while, it was like he showed me, pictures of his grandchildren, because we had, we had this thing between us. But boy, when I tell you that I was ready to quit. And just start, it was the worst.
God.
But that was, when you think about workplace stories, I love that you guys do this. And I'm sure that it's not always, funny or
this it has to be our best one.
This is the funniest one so far.
This is like amazing.
That is I thought this was a career ending.
You left an indelible impression, and that's really what you were going for.
And that's what I was going for.
Yes.
It could have been career ending, but hey, listen, he will never forget me. Probably not right now today. He probably
God.
We could do a whole episode on when you put your foot in your mouth.
The benefits, right?
The guest would be Joe.
That's so amazing, Shelly.
That was the worst. So.
Oh, thank you for that story. So okay, let's go around. Last words. Michelle, last words.
Well, thank you. It's been fun, great insights, and I learned something about the Supreme Court threat. So thank you for that. Just thank you for the work that you're doing, and wonderful conversation.
Awesome.
Oh, I should also add one other thing. It's been in my mind, and I'll just kick myself for the ride home if I don't mention this. And I don't want this to turn into another pod, but the kind of white men kind of turning into the minority. I have to say, I don't really agree with that one. I'm just putting that on the record. We can move on.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So breaking through the status quo in hiring practice. Joe, last words.
I'm sorry, Shell. Hardcore. No. I just, again, echoing what Michelle said, thank you for everything you're doing. I so want to follow up about metrics and personality assessments. And, I think that's a huge untapped opportunity, but I've also been a part of the world of people that has gotten hurt by it, right? Like I had an opportunity to join an organization and do leadership development programming, but they were like other companies where you have to start somewhere. And when I went through the interview process to start at the place I needed to start, it was not my personality, and so I didn't get hired. And so the person that wanted me to join his team to help do leadership development, I wasn't a viable candidate. So I get when people are like, "Oh, these personality assessments, I don't like them, I don't trust them." I get it, but we've also seen the value through things like Cloverleaf, where it can just take relationships up, not even this next level, like 10 levels up. So
Yeah.
Michelle, last words.
I agree with you. With that, we can have another conversation.
Sidebar.
Sidebar. I will say, breaking through the status quo, I think that we have to kind of just do, when you think about best practices and just practices, period, if we can come from a place of just doing what's right. If we just do the right thing as an organization, predictive indexes, assessments, and all that, that's something. But if we just do the right thing and look to do the right thing in hiring, I think that will help. There is one thing I will say, last thing I will say, that there is this, people, the golden rule is always to treat people the way you want to be treated. I think if organizations treat people the way they want to be treated and consider that a part of that is considering them the way they show up, that we will be better as organizations if we do that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So my last words are diversity rules. I think that I think the numbers will show, and I think people like yourself, as long as you keep pushing, and you should do more podcasts, definitely, just for more diversity hires that are out there and diversity leaders that are out there, because some of the things that you pointed out are innovative. And I think as long as that's going on within organizations, organizations are their people. So as long as there's more people like yourself, then we will thrive regardless of what the Supreme Court says. So thank you all for listening again. This has been another episode of the Workplace Theater Podcast. And thank you again, Shelly McAdoo.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Until next time.
Till next time. Till soon.
If today's discussion resonated with you, don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button now, leave a review, and rate Workplace Theater. Your support helps us improve. Do you have questions or comments? Click the link in our show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning into the Workplace Theater.
We hope you've enjoyed our podcast. If you're interested in new ways to inspire your team, need help with a sticky workplace situation, or you'd like a communication and engagement strategy for an upcoming important objective, please contact us by emailing workplacetheater@gmail.com. This has been a Working Better Together experience, a division of Exponential Consulting, LLC.